My name's Emily, and I own a small cafe on the edge of town, right where the main road curves toward the harbor. It's called the Driftwood Cup, a name that sounded poetic when Aaron and I painted it on the sign 3 years ago. Now the paint is chipped, the roof leaks, and the sign looks like it's barely hanging on, just like me. The storm last night was the worst in a decade, the kind that shakes the walls and makes you wonder if the sea will finally decide it's had enough of staying politely behind the shore. When I unlocked the cafe that morning, the smell hit me first. Wet plaster, burnt wires, and salt. A kind of dampness that clings to everything it touches. Aaron wasn't there. My husband had driven off before dawn, mumbling something about helping the guys at the dock. No kiss goodbye, no offer to check the roof, just the sound of the truck fading into the wind. I told myself not to care. Storms make people restless. But when I saw the breaker panels sparking near the espresso machine, I felt that same sharp panic I'd had the night I opened this place for the first time. I shut the main power off, wiped rainwater off the counter, and called the electrician whose card I'd found on the bulletin board at the grocery store. Jake Miller, residential and commercial repair. Denise from the bakery had mentioned him once. New guy, quiet type, good with his hands. I didn't care about quiet. I just needed the lights to stop flickering. He arrived an hour later, boots still damp, carrying a toolbox that looked older than he was. Late 30s maybe, strong shoulders, eyes that took in everything without asking much. "You're Emily?" he said. His voice was low but calm, like he'd seen worse mornings than this. "Yeah, place got hit hard, power's acting weird." He nodded once, looked around, then went straight to the breaker box. No small talk, just work. He asked for a towel, spread it out neatly, and laid his tools on it like he was setting a table. I liked that. No fuss, no complaining. While he checked the wiring, I tried calling Aaron again. Straight to voicemail. I hung up before the beep, suddenly aware of how loud the dripping sounded in the empty room. "Wiring's old," Jake said, breaking the quiet. "Water got in through the vent. You're lucky it didn't spark worse." "Lucky's not exactly how I'd put it." He glanced at me then, the faintest trace of a smile, tugging at one corner of his mouth. "Could have been a fire. I've seen cafes burn down from less." He worked for hours, stopping only to test a line or wipe his hands. When I offered coffee, he nodded but didn't drink it, until the lights came back on. He stood by the meter, cup in one hand, watching the needle like it was something alive. Around 2, sunlight slid through the clouds, cutting across the counter. The cafe finally looked like itself again, just tired. Jake packed up, scribbled a few notes on a scrap of paper, and handed it to me. "Don't plug anything into these 2 outlets. They're dead for now. Roof needs patching before I can finish." I nodded. "I'll find someone." He started for the door, then paused. "You've got a good setup here. Be ashamed to lose it to bad wiring." That was the closest thing to kindness I'd heard all day. He left, and the place felt different, not fixed, but steadier. When I went to put his notes in the drawer, I saw a lighter sitting there, plain, metal, scratched up. The kind of things someone carries for years. Must have been his. I picked it up, turned it over in my palm. I should have run outside to give it back, but I didn't. Instead, I slid it into the drawer next to the spoons. I told myself I'd return it when he came back to finish the job. But a small, inexplicable part of me wanted to keep it there, like proof that someone had shown up when things were breaking apart. The storm was over, but I could already feel the first cracks spreading, just not in the walls. 3 days later, the sky finally looked clean again. The street still smelled like seawater, and the cafe ceiling was patched with temporary boards that made everything echo. Business was slow. Locals were fixing roofs or fighting with insurance. I filled the silence with the hiss of the milk steamer and the clatter of cups, pretending things were normal. Jake came back that morning, toolbox in hand. "Just checking the lines," he said, though I hadn't called him. His shirt was cleaner than last time, sleeves rolled up. I nodded toward the back. "Breakers all yours?" Aaron was still gone. His messages were short, busy, don't wait up. No question about how the cafe was holding up. Just silence that stretched like bad wallpaper. Jake moved through the place quietly, methodical. He tested outlets, tightened a few screws, and wrote numbers on a notepad. "You've got some new corrosion already," he said, crouching near the pastry case. "Stormwater's sneaky. Gets in, stays in, like bad memories," I said before I could stop myself. He looked up, not smiling exactly, but something close. "Yeah, something like that." By noon, the regulars started drifting in, among them Lauren, a local journalist, who used to write pieces about small-town success stories. She ordered her usual latte and eyed me over the rim of the cup. "Heard Aaron's been around the docks a lot lately," she said. "Saw him at Murphy's bar last night." With a woman from the marina, I think I pressed the tamper harder than I meant to. Probably business. "Sure," she said, shrugging, but the tone wasn't kind. "Anyway, glad your place survived." She dropped a tip and walked out. Jake was rewiring the panel when I turned back. I thought he hadn't heard, but his shoulders were tight. "You okay?" he asked without looking up. "Fine." People talk. He nodded once, no judgment, and went back to work. But when he finished, he lingered by the counter, rubbing his hands on a rag. "You shouldn't have to clean up all this by yourself," he said finally. I gave a short laugh. If I waited for help, I'd still be sweeping water. He didn't argue. Instead, he looked around the cafe, like memorizing where everything went. Then he picked up 2 sacks of coffee beans stacked near the door. "Where do you want these?" I started to protest, but he was already carrying them toward the storage room. I followed, mostly to make sure he didn't drop them. The back room smelled like damp wood and roasted beans. I flipped the light switch and it buzzed to life. "Corner by the shelf," I said. He set the bags down, straightened up, and we both reached for the same clipboard. Our hands brushed. Nothing dramatic, just skin against skin. But it felt like a live wire running under my ribs. He pulled back first. "Sorry, it's fine." But my voice came out quieter than I meant. For a moment, we just stood there. The dripping from the roof had stopped days ago, but the air still felt heavy. I wanted to say something, thank you maybe, or stay a little longer, but the words didn't form. Jake cleared his throat, wiped his palms on his jeans. "You should think about grounding the panel better," he said, retreating into work talk. "Old wiring's not built for all this moisture." "Yeah," I said, "I'll look into it." He nodded and stepped back toward the front, but paused halfway. "If you need extra hands fixing things, roof, walls, let me know. I'm around." When he left, I watched through the front window as he crossed the street, head down against the wind that was starting again off the water. That night, the cafe was empty. I sat by the counter, wiping it down more times than necessary. My reflection in the glass looked older than it had a week ago. I thought about the way Jake's hand had felt, warm, steady, real. Then about Aaron's unread messages and the way his voice had sounded lately, polite and distant. Outside, rain began to fall again, soft at first. I turned the sign to closed, locked the door, and stood there for a long time, listening to the hum of the lights Jake had fixed. They were steady now, no flicker, no spark. But inside me, something small and uncertain had started to buzz, and I didn't know yet if it was danger or relief. The next week brought clear skies and a strange calm that didn't feel earned. The cafe smelled like new paint and burnt espresso. I was trying to mask the damp that still clung to the walls. Aaron had come home 2 nights ago, all smiles and promises. Flowers on the counter, dinner plans, the kind of careful sweetness that usually follows guilt. He asked nothing about the cafe, only if Jake was still hanging around. That morning, Jake arrived to finish the rewiring. He knocked once and stepped inside, eyes flicking toward Aaron's truck parked out front. "Didn't think you'd be open this early," he said. "I'm not," I replied, "just catching up before the breakfast rush." Aaron had left again at dawn, claiming he needed to meet a supplier. The word supplier tasted false in my mouth, but I didn't say it out loud. Jake got to work near the counter, tracing wires along the wall, checking outlets with quiet efficiency. I wiped the tables that didn't need wiping and tried not to think about how strange it was that I felt more at ease with a stranger holding pliers than with my own husband at the dinner table. When I took a call from Aaron around noon, Jake was crouched behind the espresso machine. Aaron's tone was warm, almost rehearsed. "Everything good there?" he asked. "Fine," I said. "Lauren said she stopped by. You two caught up?" "Briefly." He paused. "She talks too much. Don't listen to her gossip." I didn't. There was a silence, the kind that feels heavier than shouting. "I'll be home tonight," Aaron said finally. "We'll make something nice. Don't work late." "Sure." I hung up before he could say anything else. When I turned around, Jake was standing, wiping his hands. He looked like he was trying to decide whether to speak. Then he said evenly, "You talk to him like you're apologizing for still breathing." The words hit harder than they should have. "That's not," I started, then stopped. "You don't know him." "I don't have to." His tone wasn't cruel, just tired. I've heard that kind of voice before. For a moment, neither of us moved. The only sound was the cooler kicking on. Then he looked away, back to the panel, like he'd said too much. "Sorry," he muttered. "Not my business." He should have left it at that, but when his shift ended, he stayed. I made us both coffee, partly because I didn't want to be alone. We sat on the stools by the window while the sun slid down behind the fishing docks. The world outside felt worn out but steady, like the calm after a confession no one had asked for. He told me he used to work in larger towns, doing contract jobs for chain stores. Didn't like it, he said. Too many people, not enough truth. "Truth's overrated," I replied. He shook his head. "No, people just use it wrong." We talked about the town, its quiet mornings, the smell of rain that never really leaves. He asked how long I'd owned the cafe. 3 years, I said. Feels longer. When I asked why he'd moved here, he hesitated. Needed somewhere that didn't remind me of anything. That was all. I didn't press. By the time I realized how dark it had gotten, the streetlights were flickering on. The cafe felt smaller in the fading light, our reflections overlapping in the glass. I reached to grab his empty cup, and he reached at the same time. His fingers brushed my wrist, not accidental, not quite deliberate either, but it was enough. He didn't move his hand right away. The air between us thickened, and for once I didn't pull back first. There wasn't desire exactly, more recognition, an ache of two people carrying too much silence. Then he stepped back, clearing his throat. "You should close up soon," he said quietly. "It's late." "Yeah," I murmured. "See you tomorrow?" He hesitated. "If you need me." When he left, I stood for a long time by the counter, staring at the lighter I'd returned to the drawer days ago. I told myself it was just work, just exhaustion. But deep down, I knew something had shifted. Something fragile and impossible to undo. By the time the summer fair rolled around, the town had mostly patched itself together. New shingles, new paint, the same gossip. The boardwalk smelled like fried dough and seaweed, and the driftwood cup was busier than it had been in months. People wanted to feel normal again, and caffeine helped. I was working the early shift when Lydia showed up. I'd seen her before, Aaron's colleague from the Marina project, the one Lauren had hinted about. She was the kind of woman who dressed like every day was an interview. Crisp shirt, hair perfect, the faintest trace of expensive perfume that didn't belong in a fishing town. "Emily, right?" she said, smiling too wide. "I've heard so much about this place." "Hope it's all good." "Of course," she said, glancing around. "Aaron mentioned how much work you've put in." "You must be exhausted." "Sometimes," I said flatly. She ordered an iced latte she barely touched, chatting about business and storm repairs like we were old friends. When she finally left, her smile lingered in the air longer than her perfume. I watched her walk down the street toward the harbor, phone in hand, and felt something in my chest twist. Jake was nearby that day, helping the town set up electrical lines for the fair booths. I caught sight of him through the window, hauling cables, sleeves rolled, his face streaked with dust and sunlight. He looked like part of the place now, steady, grounded. We waved once, nothing more. But when our eyes met, I forgot what I was supposed to be doing for a second. The fair stretched into the evening. Music, kids with cotton candy, the hum of generators. The cafe closed early so I could deliver a batch of pastries to the town square. It started to drizzle, not a storm, just a soft, warning kind of rain. Jake was at the far end of the lot, coiling extension cords. "You're still working?" I asked. "Last booth," he said, straightening. "They keep overloading the line." "Same as always," I said. He smiled faintly. "You should head home." "Roads get slick fast around here." I nodded but didn't move. The rain was picking up, light bouncing off his jacket. "You want a ride?" I asked. "I'll walk," he said. "Only a few blocks." I hesitated. "Then I'll wait till you're done." He looked at me then, really looked. "You don't have to." I know. We didn't speak for a while, just the hiss of the rain, the distant music, and the smell of wet asphalt. When he finally rolled up the last cord, he walked beside me toward the parking lot. We stopped under the awning near my car, the rain heavier now, drumming above us. He said quietly, "You don't look happy when you talk about him." I should have said something measured, something neutral. Instead, I said, "He stopped asking me how I'm doing 2 years ago." Jake exhaled, slow. "That's a long time to not be seen." I turned to unlock the door, but my hands wouldn't move. The sound of the fair faded behind us. He stepped a little closer, and for a second, neither of us did anything. Then I kissed him. It wasn't soft or planned. It was fast, a pull from somewhere deep. Anger, loneliness, confusion, all of it. His hand found my arm, but he didn't pull me in or push me away. When I realized what I'd done, I stepped back. The air felt colder instantly. He looked at me for a long moment, rainwater running down his jaw. "Emily, don't," I said. "Please, just don't." He nodded once, stepped back, and walked away toward the darkened end of the street. At home, Aaron's truck was in the driveway. The kitchen lights were on. He was asleep on the couch, his phone half under a pillow. I shouldn't have looked. I really shouldn't have. But I did. A text from Lydia glowed on the screen. "Thanks for tonight. Always good to talk in person." I stood there, phone still in my hand, heart pounding. Then I deleted the message, not out of mercy, out of something uglier. When I finally crawled into bed, Aaron shifted in his sleep, turned toward me, and draped an arm over my waist like nothing had changed. Maybe, in his mind, nothing had. But I lay there, eyes open, the taste of rain still on my lips, and knew that whatever line I'd crossed tonight couldn't be uncrossed. And for the first time, I didn't feel guilty, just awake. A week later, I came in early to prep for the morning rush. The sky was overcast again, heavy with that same gray the sea wears before bad weather. The cafe was quiet, too quiet, and the air felt off. When I flipped the main switch, there was a short crackle behind the counter. Then a thin line of smoke curled out from the wall outlet near the grinder. "Not again," I muttered, grabbing the extinguisher from under the sink. The flame caught for only a second, small but angry. I sprayed until the hiss of foam drowned the sound. My hands were shaking by the time it was out. The smell, burnt insulation, scorched coffee grounds, filled the room like a warning I should have seen coming. Jake arrived before I could even call. "Heard the alarm over the radio," he said, pushing through the door. His shirt was half-buttoned, hair damp from the mist outside. He took one look at the wall, then at me. "You okay?" "I'm fine," I said, though my voice betrayed me. It was small. Just a spark. He crouched near the outlet, inspecting the blackened edge. Small fires don't start on their own. Power probably surged through the wet line again. I leaned against the counter, trying to steady my breathing. "I thought we fixed it." "We did," he said, "but moisture gets into places you can't see. Sometimes it just waits." He stood, looked at me again. His eyes softened, then hardened just as quickly when the door slammed open. Aaron. He walked in fast, scanning the room like he'd been expecting a scene. "What happened?" he demanded. "Short in the wiring," I said. "Jake came by to what?" Aaron cut in, eyes narrowing. "You call him every time something breaks now?" Jake straightened, voice calm but firm. "She didn't call me. I was nearby." Aaron stepped closer, jaw tight. "Convenient." I moved between them. "Aaron, stop. The wiring's still wet from the storm, that's all." He ignored me. "Funny how you're always around when I'm not," he said to Jake. Jake met his stare. "I'm doing my job." Aaron laughed once, bitter. "Is that what we're calling it?" It happened fast after that. Aaron shoved him hard. Jake staggered, but didn't hit back at first. Then Aaron swung again, a clumsy punch fueled more by pride than anger. Jake caught his wrist midair. The sound of the struggle filled the cafe, heavy and ugly. I yelled for them to stop, but neither listened. The extinguisher clattered to the floor. Aaron's voice rose. "You think I don't see what's going on here?" Jake's reply was quiet, almost pitying. Maybe you should have seen it sooner. That's when Aaron swung again. This time, Jake blocked it, stepped back, and let go. "I'm done," he said. "I don't fight in other people's ruins." He grabbed his toolbox and walked out, the door slamming behind him. The sound lingered longer than the smoke. Aaron stood there, breathing hard, face red. "You think I'm stupid?" he said finally. "I think you're late," I answered, my voice shaking. "Late to fix anything that actually mattered." He stared at me for a long time, something flickering in his eyes. Anger, hurt, or maybe just recognition. Then he turned, walked to the back room, and started gathering his things. An hour later, the cafe smelled like burned sugar and cold air. Aaron came out with a duffel bag and a folded note. He placed it on the counter beside the ruined outlet. "Take care of your business," he said, "and your help." He didn't wait for me to respond. The door closed behind him, and this time it stayed closed. I stood there for what felt like hours. The extinguisher foam had dried to pale streaks on the tiles. Outside, gulls circled the docks like nothing had happened. When the last bit of smoke cleared, I finally unfolded the note. It was short, written in his usual rushed scrawl. "Be careful what you start, Em. Fires don't always burn out." I almost laughed. The irony was too sharp to ignore. I set the note down, turned off the lights, and for the first time in weeks, didn't check my phone. The cafe was half broken again, but standing, so was I. The cafe opened again 2 weeks after the fire. Half the tables were gone. The air still smelled faintly of smoke, no matter how long I kept the doors open. Insurance covered enough to patch the walls and replace some wiring, but not enough to make the place feel whole again. Jake showed up one morning without calling. He stood in the doorway, hands in his jacket pockets. "You need help," he said simply. "I can't pay you," I replied. "Didn't ask." So we worked. He replaced the shelving by the counter while I scrubbed soot off the mugs. Neither of us said much at first. The rhythm of work filled the space where words would have gone. By evening my back ached, his hands were raw, and the cafe looked a little less like a crime scene. When I offered him coffee, he smiled a little. "You still making it strong?" "Stronger," I said. He nodded, taking a sip. "Fits the mood." The days blurred after that. Repairs, orders, silence. We talked about screws and wiring, never about Aaron or that night. But every once in a while, when our hands brushed passing tools or paint rollers, I felt something faint and unresolved. Not tenderness, something more like recognition. Two people standing in the ashes, each pretending they weren't still on fire. One evening, near closing, I found his old lighter on the bar. I hadn't seen it since before the fire. The metal was blackened, edges warped from heat. I picked it up carefully, thumb tracing the burn marks. He noticed. "Didn't think that thing survived." "It was under the counter," I said. "Guess it wanted to stay." He gave a dry laugh. "Funny, little things last longer than people." That line hit harder than I expected. I looked at him, the way he leaned on the counter, exhausted but steady. "You're leaving soon, aren't you?" He hesitated. "Yeah, heading south, got a job lined up, smaller town, less salt in the air." I nodded, trying to sound neutral. "You'll like it there." "Maybe." "But it's time. You've got this place handled." "Barely," I said. "Still better than before." He set his gloves on the counter, glancing around like he was memorizing the place. "You made it through." I wanted to tell him that making it through and being okay weren't the same thing, but instead I said, If you ever come back, I'll make you coffee myself." He smiled faintly. "Bitter, right?" "Yeah, bitter but real." He left after sunset. The sound of his truck faded down the road until it blended with the wind off the water. I stood there for a while, the burned lighter warm in my hand. Not as a keepsake, just a reminder that fire doesn't always destroy. Sometimes it just leaves a mark to make sure you remember. When I locked up that night, the cafe was quiet again, but not empty. The repairs weren't finished. The air still carried smoke. Yet it felt alive in a way it hadn't for months. Maybe that was enough, for now. 6 months later, the driftwood cup was open again for good. The roof no longer leaked, the walls were clean, and the new ceiling lights hummed evenly. On most mornings, I got here before sunrise, when the street was still gray and the sea sounded like breathing. The fire damage had been repaired, but every time I walked in, I still caught a faint trace of smoke in the corners. Something only I seemed to notice. Business had grown again. The fishermen came early, the regulars stayed late, and every day started with that same hiss of the espresso machine Jake had rewired before he left. He never came back, and I stopped expecting him to. Aaron did come back once in a while, not to talk, just for coffee. He'd show up on Thursdays around noon, stand in line like everyone else, and order the same black drip he used to complain was too harsh. We didn't argue anymore. We didn't talk about Lydia or the house or the note he'd left. We were polite strangers now, which somehow was easier. "Business looks good," he said one afternoon, glancing around the cafe. "It's steady," I answered. He nodded. "You always were stubborn." I smiled a little. Still am. He left a few bills on the counter, more than the coffee cost, and walked out. I watched him cross the street to where Lydia waited in their car. She looked like she belonged somewhere else. Clean, composed, a little bored. I didn't feel anger anymore. Just distance, the kind that settles when both sides finally stop pretending. A week later, a kid from the neighborhood came in holding something shiny. "Found this outside by the door," he said, handing it to me. It was the lighter, Jake's lighter. The metal was duller now, scuffed from weather, but it still clicked open with that same solid sound. I thanked the boy, gave him a muffin on the house, and set the lighter on the shelf beside the register. Not as decoration, not as a secret, just as something that had survived. Sometimes customers ask about it. "Old habit," I tell them, "reminds me to be careful with sparks." When the morning rush slows, I pour myself a cup of black coffee, no sugar, no cream. The bitterness has grown on me. It tastes honest. Outside, the ocean keeps doing what it always does, coming and going, never asking permission. I stand at the counter, watch the gulls move across the horizon, and think about how easy it is to lose things you thought would last forever, and how strange it feels when the world keeps going anyway. The sign outside still reads the Driftwood Cup. The paint's been touched up, but I left one small patch faded, just enough to remember the storm. I take another sip. The taste is sharp, dark, and clean. Bitter, but real.